Good morning. I am Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and I'm joined with Lisa Sherberdoff from the Brooklyn Defender Services. And I believe we all witnessed what I believe was a horrific incident that took place over the weekend with a mother and her one-year-old child. Clearly, our police department, the most well-trained department in the country, should be able to de-escalate a situation with the baby and the mother without duplicating Trump's security border removal of children. To watch the images of a child being yanked from their parent is something that is not reflected of a city that's a sanctuary city, and that is a city that spoke volumes against what was happening on the southern border of our country. We must do better, and we are better than the images that we witnessed over this weekend. It is important for us, as we look at what happened on Friday, 23-year-old Jazmine Headley. She has been waiting for 2 hours. This is 4 hours. She has been waiting for 4 hours just to get some of the basic services. And when you think about many of the people who come here, their lives are already at bottom. And to have that move to a place where they need to sit on the floor while they receive their basic services, it sends the wrong message. This is supposed to be a place where families come to regain their dignity and respect and not have it ripped away from us. The office was reportedly crowded, more crowded than normal. There was a slower process, and just to think that you have to wait 4 hours, as it was just mentioned, that sends the wrong message. A female security guard approached the mother and shared with her, after she was already sitting on the floor reportedly for some time, shared with her that she couldn't sit on the floor. I think the best way of telling her she could not sit on the floor was to get her a chair and allow her to sit in the chair. There's no reason we don't have fold-up chairs or other chairs to accommodate people during this particular time of the year. 10 minutes later, she returned with other guards, as is reported, and they subsequently called the New York City Police Department. A female sergeant responded with other officers. What was alarming, that during the melee between the mother and her child, that there was a taser that was pulled. I don't quite understand what police procedure would cause for a taser to be pulled and pointed at the crowd and pointed at the child as well, and children who were there as well. That is, a taser, if it's used improperly, can cause extremely serious injury. In some cases, it can cause death. And so as we look at it now, Ms. Headley is currently at Rikers Island. Some of the charges, as Lisa will go through, include endangering the welfare of the child. The mother didn't endanger the welfare of the child. The actions of the department endangered the welfare of the child. We're calling for those charges to be immediately dropped. We're calling for this mother to be released, and any other action that will prevent her from being able to reunite with her child, we want it to be changed. But we also want to focus our attention also on FJC security. It has been reported that at least 16 lawsuits against FJC security by shelter residents since 2015. Do they have the proper training to deal with an environment where many people who come here and come to any of our centers, they are already experiencing trauma. They are already experiencing beliefs that the city and the state and the country have abandoned them. And our services can't be a continuation of that abandonment. And if the security personnel here do not possess the basic level of de-escalation skills, then they should not have that contracts. These contracts should be in review. because the mere fact you call the police on the person who's merely sitting on the floor, that action in itself is an escalation, not a de-escalation, and should not be used in this manner. The police should not be a tool to further exacerbate a situation between the public who's seeking some type of assistance. So we have some real questions that we're asking. What is the role of HRA police? They are supposed to receive this training. They are supposed to be able to respond in a more appropriate fashion. What accommodation does HRA make to ensure that young mothers with children who are their clients are appropriately cared for? What does HRA do when you get an unexpected surge? This is not new. This should not be a surprise. We know our numbers are high. Are we prepared for the incoming? Should we stagnate hours? Should we allow people to utilize technology and give them windows of opportunity to be able to come pick up their support that they're looking for? No one should have to wait 4 hours to receive city services. That is an indictment on the entire process. And what triggers the calling of NYPD by HRA police or by those who are responsible? Why was a taser pulled?
Day off of work to come down here to try to straighten this out. She was down here with her infant because she had no place to bring her infant, and she brought him here so that she could find out what was going wrong, so she could get him back into daycare so she could go back to work. She had to take a day off to do that, and she got here at 9 in the morning, and there was not enough seats. Now, as you just heard, there's been quite a bit of overcrowding in many of these facilities, in part due to, I think, some closures, but there was not enough seating. I think a lot of people had no place to sit, and she was sitting on the floor. She was asked to move multiple times. There was no place to go. And the security, I guess, decided to call 911. Now, I agree, of course, that that was the worst option that they could have used. When people come to this office, they're here because they're in crisis. They have a situation that they are dealing with that is important, that is life and death for them. And there are social workers that work here. This is a social services agency. There are people that are very well equipped to handle situations where things are difficult, including opening a folding chair, but even short of that, giving somebody an option of somebody to talk to, or even somebody who's not a law enforcement intervening. And that's not what happened. Instead, they escalated the situation by bringing the police department in. I'm sure that most of you have seen the video, but just in case anybody who hears this press conference did not, the video was taken by people who happen to be in the same waiting area, and it starts with the police yanking our client's child out of her arms while she's on the floor, as she's screaming, my baby, you're hurting my baby." And instead of stopping and calming and, you know, just relaxing for a minute and thinking about a solution, which after watching it myself, I'm sure could have been handled, they continued and continued and continued to take that baby. And it was a violent encounter where the child was being used as a pawn. And it is very, very disturbing to watch it. And it is reminiscent of what has happened to even some of our clients at the border. And so what happened then was they arrested Miss Headley. Now, Miss Headley was charged with obstructing governmental administration, and she's charged with endangering the welfare of her child, which is absurd. But the thing that I want to make, really clear is that because of that charge, when she came to court, the district attorney asked for, and the judge issued a full order of protection, which means that Miss Headley is not able to see her child right now for an incident that she didn't do anything to her child nor endanger her child in any way. Now, I have a lot of confidence that that part of it might get resolved, and she is currently at Rikers Island due to something unrelated to this, but having to do with a misunderstanding of something that happened in New Jersey. But she's not a person with a long criminal record or anything like that. This is really a one-of-a-kind situation. And when she got arrested, ACS then had to take her child. And now ACS did give the child to her the grandmother of the child, Miss Headley's mother. And Miss Headley's mother also has a job, and Miss Headley's mother has to go to work tomorrow. And the child will then have to be watched by the child's great-grandmother. And by the way, the one issue, which is the child care of this young child, has not been resolved because Miss Headley was forced to leave this center. So what I just want to point out is that, as we just heard, the escalation of this not only points out something very disturbing about the police and the police solutions to these incidences, but it also highlights how easily one decision on the police to arrest somebody can actually really fan out and create so many consequences for this family. I'm glad to know that the child's in good hands with his own family. I am confident that district attorney, after looking at this, will take care of this. And I'm very confident that Brooklyn Defender Services will represent this client. But I will, and she will get a good outcome. But I am worried that who knows how long ACS will be looking at this family. There's a report out there on them that has to be investigated. We will represent her during that process, of course. But this is a tragic situation for somebody who's just trying to keep her job. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Sure. I'm Executive Director of Brooklyn Defender Services, SCHREIBERSDORF. First name Lisa, L-I-S-A.
And we open it to Lisa. And I just think that you really need to emphasize, and I thank Lisa for just really showing us the tragedy of the moment, entering an agency to seek help. Not only did she fail to get that help, she's now incarcerated and charged with endangering the welfare of a child. The complexity of her trauma was added on. That is just not what we're supposed to do as a city agency. When you come here to HRA, you're at the end of your rope. You have nowhere else to go. This is where you're supposed to go to get the opportunity just to normalize your life. And instead of her life being normalized, it was traumatized. And she is no different than ICE snatching babies on the border, than NYPD snatching babies inside our border. If it's wrong in Mexico, then it's wrong in New York City. And that is what is at crisis here. There needs to be a complete, thorough investigation, everything from the security to the police to HRA staff. How do we give people the help they need and not further complicate the challenges that they see in their lives? And I want to thank Councilman Levin. I spoke with him this morning. His staff is here as well, and also the district leader, Nick Russo is here as well, and the other electeds who have called. We were responding to this at 1:30 this morning of seeing how we could assist this family. And this is one of many families during this time of the year. During this time of the year, it's a challenging time of the year of families. I knew that from policing. It's a very challenging time of the year. This is one of the highest level of security of people who commit suicide. Happens this time of the year. People are broken this time of the year. And to add to that brokenness should not be the role of the city. And so not only do we want answers, we want real reforms to prevent this from happening again. We'll answer any questions to Lisa or myself.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I really want to thank all the people that were present in the waiting room who decided to open up their phone and peacefully record this. But for those recordings, we do not know how this would come out in court or what this would look like to the public. It's a real opportunity, and I really want to applaud those people because they did that in a very peaceful manner and in a way that didn't further escalate a bad situation, but allowed us to have this conversation now. Thank you.
Why wasn't the officer charged with assault?
Hold on, brother. Let me get from the press, and then we'll talk later.
As an experienced police captain, what could have or should have happened to de-escalate that situation?
And that's so important because far too often a police leaves a precinct with a toolbox full of tools on how to de-escalate situations. When you go to economically challenging communities, you don't use those tools, you just use a hammer. You cannot escalate to that level. That was not an emergency. It was not a violent crime. It was about a conversation. It was about, let's find this woman a chair. You know, talk to her. She's a human being that is going through trauma. Identify, I'm interacting with a person that has been waiting 4 hours, that is unsure about her personal status. Let me communicate with her and not feel I'm going to go in and treat her as though she's a criminal. So it was about a conversation. And by having that conversation, you could de-escalate situations by showing people the passion that they deserve. CPR is more than just letters on the side of the car. Courtesy, professionalism, and respect. She did not receive courtesy, she did not receive professionalism, and she did not receive the respect she deserved.
Lisa,
could you respond to how one officer pointed her taser at the crowd? As a former police officer, how do you feel about that?
A taser is an excellent tool of dealing with a violent, emotionally disturbed person. There was nothing in that scenario that showed that we had to point the taser at the crowd or point the taser at children who was in the crowd, because there's only one shot to that taser. So I don't know how is that considered crowd control. And it's imperative that if there's no full understanding instructions of having that taser, then we need to do so. And this type of training of de-escalation and dealing with people in crisis, it needs to be something that's repeatedly done in the police department. We can never lose sight of that. As soon as I pull up as a police officer to this incident, I'm saying to myself, I'm going to deal with the person that's in crisis. And so I have to change my posture to say, how do I deal with a person with crisis? Not how do I deal with a person that's a criminal. This mother was not a criminal. She was in crisis, and we made her crisis worse.
Lisa, can you talk about a little bit more about what led her to come to the office that morning, how she found out her benefits had been cut off, and then can you and Mr. Adams also talk about whether this experience, this incident, is reflective of the experiences of your clients and your constituents who also receive public benefits?
So the question is a little more about what brought her to the office. Again, I haven't spoken to Ms. Headley in detail about this part of it, but according to her mother, she had the child in daycare, and then she was informed that that public assistance, which was previously paying for that, was not going to pay for it anymore. And I don't know what the reason was, but I know that she took a day off from her job in order to come down here and resolve it, which I think is what any of us would do if we found out that we were not going to receive something that we had previously been entitled to. In terms of other clients, I'm going to reiterate, I think that poor people in this city are often treated very less than in many, many city-run agencies. It is not uncommon for people who are in offices like this, or in schools, or in all kinds of different institutions that are run by the city, to find themselves arrested because of an incident that really wasn't criminal. That somebody in that institution, and I'll use the schools as a good example, a security guard, and it's commonly a security guard who's not fully trained, doesn't have the resources to really figure out how to de-escalate, that they find themselves sort of they have one request of the person, and in this case it was get up off the floor, but oftentimes it's something similar to that, and the person doesn't comply, and the next thing we know, the police are there. The police also have one tool. I mean, they do have some skill, hopefully, in trying to de-escalate, but when they arrive at a situation like this, they also have one tool, and that's arrest. And their position is, let's just get everybody out and let's arrest the person. And we find ourselves with a lot of clients who are arrested in places like shelters, like other city agencies, schools, and it's very unfortunate. And I would say that it's mostly happening in communities of color usually, and poor communities. And I think with what's happening in Brooklyn, which is exciting and vibrant, I think there are more and more people with the gentrification and the communities getting squeezed into smaller and smaller spaces. I think there is a little bit more trauma and a little more problem that agencies are dealing with. And so, you know, I do think it is not a one-off type of incident. Thank you. You want to add anything to that?
No, I thought it was well said.
Yes.
You know what happened in the moment before? We only see the cell phone video, but for them to say that this was disorderly conduct, is there something else going on?
Well, whenever you see disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, obstruction of governmental administration, right away, you know, a red flag pops up. Because those are tools and crimes normally used when someone did not commit a crime and we want to justify our actions. No matter what happened before that, no one was injured. There is no police procedure that would require police officers responding to a dispute to yank a child out of a mother's hand unless that child was in immediate danger and threat. Sitting on the floor is not a 7 major crime category. She should not have been treated that way.
To your knowledge, were there any social workers or counselors on site that stepped in to de-escalate?
I think that's an excellent question. Anytime I believe for a non-violent encounter that the police or security is interacting with a client, a social worker should come in and be the bridge between that interaction, because we are dealing with people who are in crisis. And so the social workers should make the determination of how do we address this. They should have been the one talking to this mother, finding out her needs, hearing her complaints. I've been here for 4 hours. I don't know what is my outcome. And just really talking her through the moment. We have reached this point of saying people don't deserve that because of their economic status. And that is not true. And I think Lisa is really saying, when we start to do an analysis, how many of our the arrests that are made in our schools, in these centers, in different locations are merely because people are in crisis and no one is taking the time to listen to them. And so the numbers speak for itself, and that's part of the analysis that needs to be done. And look at the disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, governmental administration, and see how many of them were born out of an incident like this. Take away the video from this, we have a mother in Rikers Island that no one is really listening to, where her child is taken from her.
Ms. Adams, what specific reforms would you call for to make sure something like this?
Well, number one, when a police enters any location with families are in crisis, immediately there should be an interaction with the social worker. And they should be part of that interaction with the family. They need to go in with the goal of de-escalation. They need to go in with that goal of de-escalation. Second, we need to look at SFC security with the number of lawsuits and complaints that they have. And what type of training are we giving HRA police? That's a separate police body that's outside the NYPD. What training are we giving them in de-escalation? What training are we giving them around crises and managing crises? And then those police precincts where you have HRA facilities located, what special training are we giving them of dealing with people in crisis? These are not crimes. That wasn't a crime that took place here. That was a crisis moment. And then we need to really examine on what process is in place on when you call the police and what are the procedures for doing so. When you take an examination of that, you begin to realize that we are not treating the individuals who come here as clients. When you treat people as clients and not criminals, you have a different response and a different outcome.
For the Brooklyn executive.
Yes.
What is the outcome? You mentioned that earlier. What's the outcome you're hoping to achieve in this legal case?
Well, obviously, we hope that the case will be dismissed by the district attorney, and I know they're looking at it now. And we hope that the police are held accountable in a way that that reflects what they did. But the other outcome that's very important is that she's immediately exonerated by ACS and able to reunify with her son without any additional interference by any government agency, so she can proceed on with her life and go back to her job.
Is there any outcome, is there any aspect of this case that you hope could somehow set a precedent that would prevent incidents of this nature happening going forward?
I would actually really like the city to look at its procedures when these kind of incidences happen in all kinds of city agencies, beyond just HRA. I agree that they need to be looked at, but a lot of city agencies have a very call the police first mentality as soon as their initial efforts don't work out. They don't have a lot of tools. And I would also like to see the police really understanding that part of their role is to manage situations that happen amongst people, and it's not always in a crisis center. A lot of times people call the police because something is happening that they can't manage. And as I said, the police tend to have a one solution, attitude towards whenever they're called, which is arrest. And as somebody who's been a defense attorney for a very long time, 3 decades plus, often there are a lot of things that can be resolved without police being involved. But if the police are going to be involved, there's no reason why the police can't resolve some things. And they just aren't trained nor focused, I think, nor are they even encouraged, I think, to serve that role. And I just have to be honest, I don't think it was always like that. I think a long time ago, there was a little more, emphasis on maybe an officer trying to resolve a situation. So I would like the police to look at that. I don't know what the solution is. I'm not a law enforcement expert, but I do believe that something could happen. And I think us as a society have to recognize that not every problem needs to be solved by law enforcement. And I think we can effectuate that by coming up with other ideas in these agencies and even when the police are called, including having social workers with them and other kinds of, I think, really meaningful changes.
So I got a question.
Hold on, brother. Let me. We're gonna wrap this up, and I'm gonna show a question. Okay, and we also joined by Bishop Maldonado, one of our clergy leaders, and I want to thank him. The police was called by the security personnel from our understanding because of the encounter with the mother while she was sitting on the floor. And again, she was there for some time. Then they made the determination that they didn't want her to sit on the floor. There was nowhere else to go. Standing 4 hours holding a child can be extremely intense. And so the police responded to the call. And so I think the breakdown was on why the call was made. Why do we feel the police was there instead of calling one of the social workers who was here? And then once the police got there, it just spiraled out of control. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, brother. Your question.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Yes, sir. But they're not just, the mere fact you have too many kids, they ain't gonna play on the kids.
I would like for you to address this to the public. Due to the fact that